He's there. He's great. He's one of the. Well, first of all, you have a PhD and you're teaching at Berkeley.
I do.
And then you have a company, successful company, Potki.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Serial interpreter. Lots of time invested, and in the community, in the tech community, very well known, and that's why the best thing for this job.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Should I take over?
Yes.
Okay. So before we start, there is one other friend whose name is Anya Dvornikova, who is just about to have her second baby. And she wanted to come, and the person guilty of that second baby, her husband Ilya, is actually somehow present. I just want to take a moment and say that our thoughts are with her, and we hope she'll be doing just great. Let me spend 30 seconds on shameless self-promotion and say that I'm a Silicon Valley representative of TMT Investment, which is a public company in London that looks for business-to-consumer startups to invest in both round A and seed round. So if anybody here knows of great companies that are looking for money, I'm your person. It's very easy to find me. Without further ado, a couple of other shameless self-promotion things is I founded a bunch of startups. I sold one of them, the internship, to Manhattan Institute. Two of the startups that I was CEO of, Fotki and Epsilon Games, went into millions of revenues and millions of customers, which are the only things that qualify somebody as silly as I am to moderate this panel. Otherwise, with all my silliness, I should have not been let lead such extremely, incredibly, unbelievably distinguished panel that we have tonight. So let me start. Should I start on the left or on the right? Let me start on the right and present Walid to you, who will talk a little bit. How about if everybody has 2 or 3 minutes of shameless self-promotion? Would that work? Okay, Walid is the first, shamelessly self-promoting.
I don't know if I can fill 2 minutes, but so my name is Walid. I started a company called Ninwa, built a couple of products that failed, and built a product that started growing called Network to Blogs. It's a Facebook application for bloggers. So if you're a blogger and you want to syndicate your content to Facebook or Twitter now as well, you want to get more traffic to your blog, it's the application for you. We build it as a social network for bloggers. So we get a lot of bloggers signing up, about 1,000 bloggers signing up every day. And we're used by a lot of the popular blogs out there. Most of the common blogs in Silicon Valley are on it. And yeah, that's what I did. I started by myself, and over time, hired more people, got more people to help me. And we're still working on it. Cool.
And I should say, he's not really good at shameless self-promotion. He reached millions of users. If you look at Alexa, and you check, for example, networkblogs.com, it's like top 300 something website. So he's done an incredible thing and almost no investment whatsoever. So let me just say, he has a lot of things to be proud of. He's just like an incredibly, a much more moderate person than the moderator. Pat, please take it away.
I'm Pat from Add2Any, ADDTOANY. So Add2Any is first a question. Have you guys seen those buttons on blogs and websites that let you share to Facebook, Twitter, all those different social networks? Usually from one button or so. My idea a long time ago was to kind of solve the problem of everybody having a Facebook, Dig, Reddit, Twitter button on their blog, combining those into one button. So March 2006, I launched this thing called Add2Any, and put this out there as nothing but a side project. Give it away for free. Let any website use it. After a while, I was working on many different things, going to school, and doing a whole bunch of other stuff, extracurricular teaching. And I noticed after like 2 years of just kind of sitting on this that it was receiving a lot of growth. Websites such as Greenpeace and some other PBS were using it, on their various blogs and stuff. It was, very popular among the WordPress crowd, the content management systems such as Drupal, WordPress, all those good things. And I'm like, all right, let's follow the growth. And then after school, I moved up from San Diego to San Francisco and decided to focus on one of my side projects. This had the most growth, and decided to see, how if I could turn it into a business. And I did. And today it reaches 500 million people on the internet each and every month. It became one of the top web widgets on the web among Google Analytics and all these other big widgets that people use for their websites and blogs. It was the largest, most distributed widget from a self-funded company in the world, which was really cool to say.
Wow. It is.
Still, but now I can't say that anymore because I just sold it recently to a company called Lockers. Just in July 5th is when it closed. And now I'm working for those guys to help them integrate Identity, take advantage of this large reach and all that stuff. So I think that's it.
Okay, it's kind of tough panel today. You need to help everybody in shameless self-promotion. If you look, one thing that I was hoping you would say is if you try pretty much any traffic tracking system out there and you look to add to any, the curve is just so beautiful. It's like whoosh. So as an investor, the first time Gleb actually mentioned that, I looked, I was like, whoa, does he need money? Gleb was like, you're too late. So it looks really beautiful. Check it out. So really, he has some secrets to share. I hope he will tonight. And now we have Gleb.
So I'm Gleb. I'm a co-founder of a company called Backblaze. It's BACK, not Black Blaze, which is what often gets mistaken, which happens to be a porn site.
Do you get a lot of traffic from it?
We periodically get customers that say, I tried to visit your site, but it's blocked at my office. A URL we wish we had registered at some point a long time ago. So it's Backblaze. It's an online backup service. The idea is very simple. We back up your laptop, we back up your desktop over the internet. It's $5 a month. We provide unlimited storage as part of that. Very, very simple concept. The whole goal was every photo has gone digital, every song has gone digital, every document has gone digital, and yet people are not backing up. And so the question was, how can we get people to actually stop doing the, I should back up. I'm going to do it this weekend. I meant to get around to it. I'm doing something, but not really, and just get people to do it. So that was the concept. 5 of us quit our jobs about 4 years ago to jointly start this company. And we had worked before at 2 other startups that we did. So it was a team that's worked together since '99. And so we knew that we wanted to work with each other. When we started, we knew that we wanted to solve the problem of backup. We actually didn't know exactly how we were going to do that. We just knew it was a problem. So we quit our jobs and got into a living room and started brainstorming, which was a little scary for a little while with no paycheck. But the company is now profitable. It's cash flow positive. It grew about 300% year over year. And we get a lot of love letters from people saying, oh my God, my computer died and you saved all my kids' photos. So it's a good feeling company to be in.
And I think in good tradition today, Gleb also needs my help with shameless self-promotion. He, just like the other 2 people here, he is one of the, actually 4, not just 3 people here, who either without any money or on very, very little money, managed to become one of the biggest players in your industry. You just, pretty much anybody else you could think of, I don't want to name the names of your competitors, he's the best, but anybody you could think of, they burn through millions and millions of dollars. And, yet, it's like kind of like, going against a professional boxer coming out of a tiny town in Alabama, having, no experience and nothing. And, he kicked ass. I mean, not just he, but his this whole company. So as you see here, we have very nice, beautiful panel today. Everybody is way too moderate for my taste. I would much rather they would be much more bombastic and kind of telling you, I'm going to tell you how to grow from 0 to millions of users. But
Take it up a notch.
yeah, let's do that. Let's take it up a
Where's
notch.
the Red Bull?
I'm drinking Coke. So the one theme that hopefully would really make everybody happy here as a result of our little discussion is how did these people, me included, how did these people manage to grow from really 0 to either millions of users and or millions of revenues? What they have, and that's my first question to the panel, which I would like all three of you to address. How did they manage being up against pretty large companies, incredibly well-funded companies, in some cases companies that actually burn through millions of dollars, that have lots of personnel, really, really powerful PR agencies working for them, all sorts of publications from TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, PC Magazine, CNET, etc., lined up and writing those, hard-to-believe articles like, oh my God, the solution has finally arrived. Having the incredible distributions, having the great connections through their investors, VCs, etc. How did they manage to fight off the competition and grow from really nothing to, or very little, to millions in users and our revenues? So Walid, would you like to be the first one to answer?
All right. So I guess it's. The world has changed in the last few years, even the last 6-7 years when the internet got so popular. In the old days, you had to actually work really hard to grow. Now it's more of a different approach. Now it's more of a finding a hack, finding a way that allows you to grow without a big budget. So I'll give you examples what I mean. For example, either you can grow viral by having a product in which the user, in order to be able to use the product or to enjoy it better, they tell their friends.
Sorry.
It's okay. So that's one approach. Another is SEO. If your website happens to be something that gets a lot of content, then find a way that allows a lot of people to link to you, and then Google will reward you by sending you a lot of traffic. There are many ways. In our case, it was these two. So we are a social blog directory. So when someone adds their blog to our system, they have a vested interest in getting a lot of followers, just like you want to get more followers on Twitter. So people promote it. People go invite all their friends and say, hey, come follow me. And we have a directory that's listed by popularity. So if you write in politics and you want to be at the top of the list, then you'd better get more followers. So in a way, the users help us grow. The second thing is we have a lot of widgets, similar to what Add20 does, not functionality-wise. But if you have a blog, you can show off how many people are following you on your blog. And those widgets link back to us. So we have a lot of widgets all over the place. Tens of thousands of websites have them, and they all link back to us, which means Google also sent us a lot of traffic. So to grow, you don't need a big budget. You need to find that hack, some way to hack the system, some way to find your in. Yeah.
Fair enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm also a fan of widgets. You use the same hack that I used, essentially. So search engine optimization via a widget is pretty easy if you can get people using it. Search engines tend to rank links higher in the search results for links that a lot of websites point to. They tend to give those links more prominence. With a widget, something that's a piece of embeddable code on a website, if you get websites to start using it, you build the widget in the right way, which I assume you did, and it's practically a link back to your website. For me, it was add20.com /share to share stuff. So, one thing I'd like to hit on is I like to go back a bit and say that I started at Denny March 2006. In about 6, 8, 10 months later, another company launched, and they launched at a big conference, the demo conference in San Diego, which you have to pay like $10,000, $20,000 or something to demo at. And, as a free side project, I didn't have, that kind of spend for something I was giving away for free. So I noticed that it was on TechCrunch, and I'm like, yeah, what the fuck, I actually created this first, and that was another component of getting to launch a demo. It had to be, original art, original technology. So, that was kind of a bummer, but it was also like validation, like, hey, people are actually spending on this idea, So, basically, another year down the line, another company spurred up, and they came with venture capital, a lot of venture capital. They raised maybe $30 million. And, all the TechCrunch comments, et cetera, were like, well, what's this widget, getting $30 million for? Mm-hmm. And, eventually business models would surface, and eventually the first competitor got acquired by another company in the widget space. And they were well-funded. They continue to be well-funded. And overall, the two main competitors that are still bigger than AdTenny, they had a combined raise of over $100 million. And I said, okay, enjoy that. I'm doing this for probably $1,000 a month, hosting AdTenny for all these websites, hosting this button, this piece of code for all these websites. And it's not costing that much, especially in this day and age. Throw it up on a CDN, and it's actually relatively cheap to host the button. And these other companies, they have HR departments, they have PR, they have all kinds of resources, at least 20 employees, and they were burning through a lot of cash. They're still burning through a lot of cash. So my trick was to stay very nimble, to utilize hacks such as Waleed's hack, getting the SEO. So when you type in share button, AdTenny's one of the top 3 that pop up. And also, finding other little hacks, other distribution methods to get this button out there. WordPress, which is an open source content management system. It's the way people publish to the web and blog. Ended up being a major distributor for AdTenny's plugin. So that was another good hack I used. But, the trick was basically, staying, underfunded, not being as comfortable as the competition, getting by on top ramen, etc. I mean, this was a very, very lean startup. Before I sold it, I was still the sole official employee. So I stayed very, very lean. And that was another trick. Aside from that, I think, being the first mover in the space had a lot to do with it too. It helped with SEO, it helped with a bunch of other aspects, getting the branding out there, etc. So.
Awesome.
Yep. So I'm actually going to contradict what Waleed said. I think it's still hard. I think it has become possible for it to be easier. But for most companies, it's still going to be a slog. Many of you guys probably know Paul Graham, and he has a chart. It kind of looks like this. The initial part is the, woohoo, we've started a company, yay, we got ourselves on TechCrunch, we're on top of the world. And then the next day, it's like, oh, and now you hear crickets for a while because, well, you got your one article on TechCrunch. Cool. Now what? Right? And there's this long slog after that as you slowly grow the company and you work and you work and you work at it and you build it. And for most companies, that's in the best case, that's the way it goes. In the not best case, it just dies, right? For a small percentage of companies, you have the YouTube effect or the Facebook effect, where one person virally tells 2, and in a short period of time, it grows on its own. Good products have a viral component, but that viral component is 2 people tell 1. Right, and so you do get customers from your existing customers, but it's not the hockey curve inherent. While you sit back and go, "Wow, that's pretty cool. What's going on?" So I think for most companies, it's still a slog. You just work at it. And one of the things that we realized when we started the company, the last two companies we did were both venture funded. So we did go down the traditional path, raise a bunch of money, hire a PR firm, hire some marketing people, the whole shindig. When we started Backblaze, we said we are going to bootstrap this. It's a different world. And so one of the things we realized was we're fundamentally playing a different game. There were competitors in the space. One had already raised $25 million at a point in time when we were sitting in the living room twiddling our thumbs and going, so what are we going to do? And so we knew that wasn't the game we were going to play. We had to play a different game. And one of the things we acknowledged was there was a high likelihood we were not going to be as big as companies that raise $100 million. But that might be fine. If we're number 2 or number 3 in a space where the other 2 players have raised $100 million and we've raised 0, that might be a perfectly good option. And so that was the game we played. And so there were lots of things that enabled growth for us. PR was a big friend. PR is free. It's much cheaper than Google AdWords. And as a startup company, when you're passionate about what you're doing, you probably have a lot of interesting stories to tell. And the press is starving for interesting stories, not press releases. So there are lots of ways to get out there. Both of these guys had really cool ideas of how to build marketing machines for their products. But a lot of what you do is you build a product that people love, because a company that raises $100 million might be able to spend their advertising dollars to get adoption. As a bootstrap company, we realized we had to have kind of like a rock band. We had to have just crazy, rabid people who loved our service and were going to go around, write blogs about it, tell friends about it, and convince everyone they knew, why aren't you backing up? Back up, I can't believe you're still losing data. You're going to lose data tomorrow, and it wasn't going to be the 5 of us. So we needed people to love the product. And so that was the first piece. And then focusing on the PR aspect of it to get a kickstart, and then optimizing the funnel to make sure that as people came in and heard about us, they wouldn't drop off at the various places. A lot of times what you see is you get to a website and you're like, I don't exactly know what I do next. Do I click a button? Do I fill out a form? Do I call somebody? Where do I go to start this? I get stuck somewhere in the process. So we spent a ton of time cutting out every single possible step out of the process. We even wrote all of our own installer code instead of using one of the off-the-shelf installers, just so we could take out extra pixels and screens and everything, because every single button click we found, you lose 50% of the people. And so you're working so hard to get people to show up to your site, and then you're just going to throw them away because you don't want to cut out a few extra button clicks. So that was a big focus for us as well.
Very interestingly, they're in somewhat different segments. And one of my stories from late 90s, when I was running a large gaming portal of over 70 games for Microsoft. We were a startup, but we were on Microsoft Web TV. There were 2 really large competitors, Lycos Games and Yahoo Games. And, needless to say, both had so much money, so much marketing power, so much PR. And we were just going out of our way to grow. And exactly like Gleb was saying, the curve was, not very nice. It's just like, the crickets at some points. And we were just like going out of our way to find out how to grow. Back then, we didn't know the word viral. But we sort of started thinking, why do users play? And the games all were very similar. I wouldn't say our games were much better. But what we figured out is that actually users are very unusual, that you need to really, really pay lots of attention to their idiosyncrasies. And one strange thing is that, we had games, and Lycos had even more, Yahoo had even more, several hundred games. But what's interesting is that they would play a couple of games on Epsilon Games, my startup. They would play a few games on Lycos games, a few games on Yahoo games, and if the more you sort of talk to the users, the more you figured out, like, oh, wait a minute, there's not one place, and remember that was back in 1990s, there is no one place where they could bookmark, and back then bookmarking was very important, there was no Google, where they could bookmark their games. So what one thing, and we experimented with lots of stuff, one thing that was incredibly powerful is that we did something that seemed almost silly. We created profiles where they could write in their profile, actually bookmark Lycos and Yahoo games that they like to play. To which some people said, wow, you guys are idiots, you're sending them to the competition. But what happened was actually lots of people from Lycos and Yahoo started coming, not to play our games, but to use that bookmarking for the games. And so there are lots of sort of very strange things, like kind of using some sort of a Trojan horse, not really the virus kind of Trojan horse, but this sort of approach where you're saying, hey, you know, I'll be nice to my competitors. I'll let users bookmark. We started growing like crazy once we let users use their profile. So sometimes the point, I totally agree with Gleb. I think sometimes the point is in, you know, figuring out the tiny little things, kind of tweaking things and figuring out how I could, you know, be better than the competition. The interesting thing is we talked to both Lycos and Yahoo games and they were like, oh, very nice. You guys are putting those profiles down there. And we were thinking, oh gosh, they're going to do it. They didn't. And the people from Lycos and Yahoo came playing our games, and those were very highly paid, you know, programmers, marketing people, and they just couldn't figure it out. And they were like, oh gosh. And we were much, much bigger than actually both. You know, again, we had like zero budget, and we were profitable and everything. So,
yeah. So that's what I mean by find your niche, find your in. So, for a product that you charge for, the best approach might be to find the best way to advertise on AdSense in such a way that if you can make $30 from a user, then if you can advertise for $25 and you get that user, then you're still profitable. It doesn't apply for a product that's free, for example. In your case, it was a feature. So it's usually something that's unique, something that's different that either nobody is doing or it's just new. Nobody has kind of figured out it's a good thing to do. So viral is just one and doesn't apply to all products. SEO is one, it doesn't apply to all products. Advertising is another. Partnerships. If your product is something, like I guess what you did with Microsoft, if your product is something that a big company that has good distribution could use and help you push it, that would be your in. So that's what I meant. Find something. Don't do what everyone else is doing, because usually that doesn't work, because it's a channel that's been already used up. Yeah, find something new.
Yeah, and find something that your competitor would be very unlikely to do. For instance, with Igor, it was bookmarking. You know, and you were kind of surprised that they didn't copy you. But you know what? It was your niche, I guess, at the time, and it really helped goose things. But you know, one common theme here is a bunch of hacks, a bunch of interesting little hacks that all these companies do. That, you know, for me, it was efficiency. It was a number of other things, just distribution methods, focusing on things that the competition was not focusing on, honing in on those and running with them as far as I could. That's what I did. But you know, find a way to gain a competitive advantage, and you know, it feels like cheating. It really isn't, but it'll feel like it when you find it.
Cool. I had the second question, which most of you guys actually talked about. So, you know, let's see if maybe you can add a little bit more to this. So, as all of you mentioned, and as I mentioned, when we were developing those companies, when we were growing, we all had, and we still have, to whatever products are out there, competitors that are extremely well funded. And you all sort of mentioned things, you know, how you fight it off, you know, what you do. So I would tweak the question a little bit. What was the feeling? What was the emotion when you read that TechCrunch or VentureBeat article about your competitor getting $20 million and Michael Arrington writing, "Finally, this thing has arrived! Finally, there is a solution!" And you're saying, what the F? You know, I've been out there for years. So, anybody wants to be the first?
So I think at some level for us, we were entering a space where people were already funded. And so it wasn't a shock that people were getting funded. We knew that that was the path that they were on. So we didn't, it didn't feel scary or bad. We knew we were playing a different game. One of our competitors just went public a few weeks ago, and we knew that they were headed to go public. In many ways, it was a good thing for us in the traditional kind of concept there, right? Which is brings a lot of attention to the online backup space. And then people start saying, well, this is an interesting company. I'm unhappy with XYZ that this company is doing or not doing. Let me look at other options. You do an online search for online backup. We're number 3. People stumble across us and find us that way. It's a different game. So, and at some level, I think back in the Mail Frontier days, we also got a little thicker skin because we kept we were in the anti-spam space, and we had invented a bunch of stuff. We were very, very innovative on the anti-spam side of things at the time, and for a long time, people kept saying, "You're stupid for doing this. You know, this is the wrong way to do it." And then, 2 years later, our competitors would come out with it. They would go to the press, and they would talk to the press, and then the press would write, "Oh my God, what a great idea! Glad someone did this." And we're like, "Really?" So part of it was just, you realize that there are thousands of people out there that are journalists, and they can't possibly know all the companies, and you hope that you get a reasonable percentage of them that are acquainted with you versus others.
So the feeling.
Emotion.
I mean, a little bit of the heart sinking, thing, the heart dropping to the floor, a tiny bit of that. But at the same time, when I saw that, my thing was nothing but one of a few different side projects. It was definitely not the coolest thing I was working on. I was working on arguably way more awesomer things with a clear path to revenue, I might add. So, I had no idea how I'd monetize AdTenny or anything, but, it was kind of exciting. It's like, wow, this competitor got funded. I've heard so many horror stories about companies or founder friends, raising VC money and just, the whole company going to shit shortly after that. And it was never, VC was never attractive to me as something to do for a first company, first big company. So, I mean, that's one reason I didn't want to raise VC. And at the same time, I was happy for the validation in the space. I'm like, okay, there's something here. What is it? Let's discuss this with a few advisors, some friends, et cetera, and see what surfaces. And for me, it ended up being sharing data. What people share on the web is actually very valuable to advertisers and marketers. That's how AdTenny, the free widget, was going to make money. So I concentrated on that shortly after I kind of, discovered that was the big angle with these guys, and stayed nimble for a long time.
All right, so I tell you one realization that I learned that I didn't know when I started, and I think a lot of new entrepreneurs don't realize, even though they think they know, but they don't. But it's how big the market is. So if you imagine, let's say this board is my market. That's whole space, and I'm working here. All my customers, we have like 1.5 million users. This is here. And this other company there got funded and they're growing. The market is just so huge that it doesn't matter. When I started and we started getting a lot of people signing up, we got like 300, 400 bloggers adding their blog every day. I was like, okay, soon we'll finish all the blogs, and then what are we going to do? And that was silly because we've been at it for years and we have almost 1 million blog. And we're not even registering anywhere. If you ask, other than the community in Silicon Valley, if you go randomly choose a blogger around the world, most likely they haven't heard of us. So the market is just so big, especially when you're starting and you're a small company. It really doesn't matter if other people join. So in the beginning, when I first started, I would panic. I would like, oh crap, So, but now, not anymore. And in fact, if the company raises a lot of money, I kind of worry for them. Like if they raise 50 million, they're probably going to be in trouble. Or it also means that they're going to be at a different level. The amount of, if I can make X money and be profitable and have a good return, have a good exit, they need to make like 1,000x because they raise 50 million, and in order to make that profitable, they need to make a lot more. So it's going to be a very different market. They have to target different customers. So yeah, recently it doesn't faze me anymore.
That's actually pretty interesting to me personally. I don't know if that applies. Would be pretty interesting to hear you guys. I don't know if that applies. I'm a recovering New Yorker. I spent 12 years in New York, and I love you too. And I love New York. I mean, it's one of my favorite places. But what a huge difference, really, in New York. And no offense, love New York and love New Yorkers. But in New York, you don't hear this kind of talks like, "Oh, dude, hang loose. It's so cool." "Oh, surf's up. It's it's so good." You just don't. You're like, this motherfuckers, I can't believe that. So my story that I would trade is, Fotki started in 98, years and years before Flickr, Photobucket, Picasa, you name it. And we had so many features. I'm sure, how many people here used Fotki? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nice, 6, 7. Very nice. So we started years before those bastards, and they're very nice. See, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm Russian too. Proud of it. You read something, people are like, "Wow, finally, you can put photos into albums." You're like, "Yeah, we had it for years." And people on Flickr were begging for it. And finally, they did it. And you still cannot do folders and subfolders. And you can't do private folders and private subfolders. And you can't do this and this and this and this. And so you're trying, being the naive, I'm from Siberia, being this naive little Siberian me, I would just call them and be like, "Oh, I can't believe you wrote about this. You can do this and this and this." And Flickr can be like, "Oh, congratulations, nice." So maybe somehow I didn't have that attitude, which leads me to the next question for you guys, which I hope would be somewhat fun. What was the toughest moment to you? Again, I'm probably asking about emotions, but I hope that would be helpful to the people here. What was the toughest moment in running your startup? When was the one time when you sort of sat down? I don't know if you cried or not, or if you broke something or got into a fight with whoever. What was the toughest moment? What was the one moment when you were just like down on your luck and thinking like, "Gosh, I should have stayed at Microsoft making my $250,000 and doing really, no offense to Microsoft, nothing, just hanging out and writing new things and just, enjoying my life." So if you had tough moments, if you didn't have tough moments, that's fine.
So for me, it was the last big downturn, the housing market crash and all that. So, here I was coasting on this widget, like, yeah, I'm going to make some money someday, somehow, with all this distribution, with all these millions of people using it, etc. Like, yeah, somebody's going to snap me up, potentially, or maybe, I'll just find a way to make money. I'll charge for a premium service or something. I didn't really come up with anything. for about two or 2.5 years around there, and then, the market crashed, and I'm like, crap, here I have the responsibility of this code on everybody's, a lot of different people's websites. And, I pay for the hosting costs and all that. And, then the hosting was, starting to skyrocket, not the bandwidth charges, but just, the increasing usage and all that. So I'm like, this is a cool problem to have, but how am I gonna, at least break even on this and pay for my own bills, etc. My competitors certainly aren't. So eventually, that's luckily the right companies, the right data partners survived this downturn in the economy. Reached out to me after a few posts on Mashable, TechCrunch, etc., saying, "Hey, Denny has access to all this data. We just released a new feature, etc." And after some of those articles came out, a lot of data partners came to me and said, hey, can we give you money in exchange for anonymous aggregate usage data? This is very valuable to us and marketers. So I was very lucky. And luck, definitely has a big part of it. The other, part of it was just being persistent. And even though there was no clear path to revenue, I figured, with this many users actively using this thing and growth still skyrocketing, there was going to be a way. And luckily, I found the right partners.
Okay, so when I started this project, it was a side project, and it kind of grew. So in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of attachment to it, like whatever. But at some point, I started working on it full time. Then it kept growing, and it became something more valuable and more important to me. And we were growing fast. The graph was just going fast. And then one day, Facebook made a big change in their system. We were only on Facebook at the time. So Facebook made a big change to how they handle profiles and pages and all that stuff. And our growth was like that, just stopped. It started going really fast. Like in 2 weeks, we lost like 300,000 users, and we had 400,000 at the time. So that was a very dark time. And basically, I kind of gave up. I said, okay, this project is over. I better be a man about it and, do something else. And so I started working on another project and started on that for a couple of weeks. And then I had an idea. Again, finding creative ideas. So I had an idea of how I can change the product to kind of maybe stop the downturn there. And I built that and launched it, and then the growth kind of stopped going down, started going up, and went up and up and much higher than before. So that was what saved the project. So yeah, but it was a tough time. Yeah.
So there were various things that, various dark times, some more than others. We had a time when we just couldn't seem to get new customers. That was, we were trying different ideas, and people just weren't showing up in mass. We had a time when a data center employee walked in and pressed the big red button on the wall and shut off all power to our entire systems for no reason other than there was an alarm going off, and he freaked out and saw a big red button and thought, well, that's a good way to turn off the alarm. Bringing our entire site and all the service down, and causing all of us to descend on the data center in the middle of the night and spend the rest of the night there. Various times. I mean, we had 2 offers on the company to buy the company, both of which were good offers. We were excited about them. We actually went down the path and took one. Spent 4 months on that acquisition process. Spent about $100,000 in lawyer bills, and blood, sweat, and tears on making that happen. And then the week the deal was supposed to close, the CEO of that other company called me up and said, "I am so sorry. I really want to do this deal. Really want to do this deal. One of my board members won't let me. Will you please restructure it with me so that we can still do this deal?" And this was somebody that I had spent 4 months working with, saying, is there anything I can do to make sure that every single person in your company is on board and excited about this deal? And he said, no, it's totally under control. You've met with everybody that you need to. Everyone's excited to do the deal. Week before it closes. That was a fairly unhappy time. But frankly, none of those actually were the time that was really the darkest. Because all of those, I was like, well, we still have a business. It's still good. We'll keep going. The darkest time for me personally was when we didn't see eye to eye internally. So fundamentally, when my co-founders and I, we had a couple of us that wanted to take the business one direction and a couple that wanted to take the business a different direction. And that was frankly the darkest time, because everything else, it felt like we're a team, we're going to make this happen, we're going to figure out whatever comes our way. And here was this moment where I kind of looked at it and said, if we don't figure this out, this is either going to be a really unhappy marriage, or it's going to be a divorce and the company's going to die. And it took a while, and we there wasn't any crying, but there was definitely some shouting, and it, trying to figure out how we could all get on one page. And it's one of those things where people don't tend to start companies if they're not passionate about what they're starting. And so you don't get people to kind of go, oh, sure, you think that's a good idea? Well, whatever. I'll take the company that way, right? People have strong opinions. So that for us, actually, for me, was the darkest time, when they felt like we weren't on the same page. And then we just kind of kept working on it, trying to figure out how we could thread the needle and find a path that we could all agree on. And we finally did that, and everybody was re-energized. But kind of to your thing of feeling like you just want to, quit and get out. All of the other parts, it was like, well, it was a bump in the road, some bigger than others. That was the only time when I was like, is this something that I'm going to keep doing or not?
Oh boy. Leads me to the last question I have, and then oh gosh, I have way too many dark moments. We actually, just like Gleb was saying,
Such a downer.
I know.
It's the worst time of my life.
No, actually, I had the worst times were with several startups when we had term sheets signed to invest in the companies, to buy a company, including by some really large companies that that I don't want to mention. And then the last moment when everything was done, and just like Gleb said, we spent tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers,
Every dollar.
She's a lawyer. Don't listen to her. So it was kind of really, just like what Gleb was saying. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to share it, because it's kind of like reliving it. And this video will be posted, so my business partner would watch and he'd be like, I told you, those damn VCs. And now I'm an investor, so I'm saying, no, we're good. You need to use this. Definitely no. There are times when you need investors. There are times when you don't. And the same with selling the company. Sometimes there are times you don't want to sell the company. So right now I'm talking to some people about other companies, about starting companies or what's going to happen to a company. And some companies are such awesome lifestyle supporting businesses that maybe you shouldn't sell it, maybe you shouldn't get it funded. It brings a couple of $1 million every year. Just enjoy your life and go surfing on Hawaii, or whatever it is you do. Help homeless kittens or something. So it's all good too. The last question I have. So I'm avoiding the answer. The last question I have is, what is one thing, or maybe several things, you guys would do differently right now? Because we always in our life, we kind of like, supposedly we get smarter. And even though all three of you are incredibly impressive, which is why you're on the panel, and I'm as impressive, you achieved lots of incredible things. But what are the things? We always learn, the more successful people are, sometimes they kind of hide it, but the more successful people are, the more they kind of relax. One of you is my former student here in the audience, and he remembers that I like to talk about the failures that I had, not just about the successes. And what would be one thing or several things you guys would do differently? Or nothing?
So when you start as an entrepreneur, you in the beginning, especially if you're like me, an engineer, you know a lot of code, but you have no idea how the world runs or how the business works. And sometimes that's an advantage, sometimes it's not. So in my case, before I built Network the Blogs, I built 2 products. I thought of an idea, I built it, spent a few months on it, and after I built it, then I thought, okay, now let me think of how to make it grow. And my idea of how to grow is email TechCrunch, email Mashable, and make sure that they write about you. And I mean, that sounds so naive now, because even if they do write about you, it's like, for instance, not thinking the whole thing, just thinking about building a product was one of my biggest mistakes. And I did it twice. I built a product, didn't go anywhere, and I built another product. I thought the problem was with the product. So I built another one, and also went nowhere. The product was really good. The technology was really good. If you use it, it's useful. But nobody knows it exists. Mm-hmm. And how do you make people know that it exists? That's the hardest problem. Building the product is not really a big challenge these days. It's how to get people to know you're there. So that would be something that I would tell if I go back in time, I would tell myself, hey, focus on finding a growth strategy from the beginning and make sure that's part of the product. It's not something you add later after you built it. It has to be somewhere in the beginning. If you're gonna give a product for free, you definitely need it. If you're gonna charge for it, you have a lot more options for you. But if you're gonna build it for free, it's not gonna be easy to grow it. So what I learned later would have helped me build my first products.
Great answer.
So I have no regrets, but upon reflection, there are some things I could have done differently, such as, coming up with a better name for this thing. Add to any, it could be interpreted, as so many different things. Add, is it AD? Is it ADD? Is it number 2? Is it TOO? Is it, there's just so many different things. When you say this word, it's hard to, that's why I say the letters when I say add to any. So I would have chose a better brand name for it, called it something very short and simple, Backpacking on what you said, I would have spent more on marketing. I mean, look at what my competitor did, who basically just cloned Ad Denny. Mm-hmm. They went with Ad Denny's, idea, cloned the site, cloned the widget, and then launched it at demo. That was their take on it. So, upon retrospect, I could have launched this thing at demo had I been more forward-thinking and had my business hat on. Anything could be turned into a business. Potentially. Right, it should at least be, looked at in that light. Second was, it was a pretty original idea. I thought it was pretty non-obvious. I was, 21 when I launched this thing. So, I was kind of against, software patents, still am, in theory. In practice, it's a different thing. But it turns out this was a pretty original idea. I wish I got that provisional patent. Spent a couple $100 at least to get the provisional done, and followed up on getting some IP. So, yeah, those 3 things.
What about Black Blaze?
Don't blame me when your significant others go, "Why are you surfing a porn site tonight?" So I think probably the one kind of overall thing that I would have done differently is when we started the company, spent more time talking about the shared vision of what we were wanted to do, didn't want to do, where we were going to take it, not take it. We did chat a fair amount about that as a group. We said, part of it was we wanted to bootstrap it. We didn't want to raise funding, so that was good that we were at least in alignment on that piece of it. We said that we wanted it to be fun. We didn't want to quit our jobs just to start something where we just felt like, well, now we're just working along and doing a job again. We wanted it to be something we were excited about and passionate about. But there were probably more subtleties than that that we could have thought through ahead of time. One of the things that happened early on was this clear miscommunication where some of the people said, "Hey, cool, we're quitting our jobs. We're going to get together. We're going to hang out. We're going to write some code. It's going to be fun, And at one point, I said, "Okay, well, we all need to put in some cash, and we need to make this. We need to put together a budget and plan a little bit." And one or two of the co-founders were like, wait, what? I thought we were gonna like hang out in the living room and like sit at the coffee table and write some code. There was a different vision of what starting a company meant. And I think some of those kind of things would have been great to talk through earlier on. We ended up working through all of them, but some of them would have been easier to do upfront rather than hundreds of thousands of dollars into the business and a year of deferred salary. So I think that would have been probably the single one big thing I would have tried to do earlier if I could.
Mine is so simple. It's just like one sentence. Move to Bay Area. I wasted. Again, no, it's not like I love New York. I love Boston. Lived in both cities. But it's such a waste of time to be anywhere but in Bay Area. It's just like a waste of time. Clueless venture capitalists, clueless press, really, really hard to find employees, like extremely hard. I talked to a bunch of friends saying, hey, would you program, would you do this and that? And I'm like, dude, I'm making, $200,000 working on Wall Street. What do you want me to do? How much can you pay? Well, like $50,000 a year. $50,000 a year? Yeah, but I'll give you equity. Equity, what's that? And you're on the East Coast. It takes lots of time to explain what it is, to explain startups. Again, no offense, and some of you, I'm sure, live there, but it's just like, to me, an immigrant who grew up in Russia. It's such two totally, completely different countries. And you talk to investors there, one of the first, not everybody, but huge majority, one of the first questions they ask you is, what are the revenues, what are the profits, how soon are you going to get to profitability? And very, very few of them understand growth. So the biggest regret I have is wasting more than 10 years on the East Coast. Thank you. Let's open this to the questions. Stas, should I put the microphone to? Okay.
We have small room,
So, whoever has questions. Yep.
First question is always hard.
just please stand up.
So, do you have a marketing cheat sheet? That's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the specific steps? Because you guys talked about, blogging. I mean, I'm an engineer too, and my initial sort of a take it would be send a few emails, right?
Yeah, so
Obviously that's not a winning strategy.
So the high level, it's well defined. It's SEO, viral, partnerships, advertising. I mean, high level, they're all known. But for each individual case is different, and you have to find yours. It's all about being creative. If you need to do marketing, if you're an engineer, specifically if you're an engineer and you don't like to do marketing in general, you can engineer the marketing process and spend a lot of your time trying to come up with creative ideas of how to make this product. Use any of these channels, whichever works for you. For Dropbox, it was invite friends and get extra storage. That was their, niche. That was their hack. For Hotmail, it was they put a footer when they send an email. The footer sent through hotmail.com. Through Zynga, invite 10 people before you can accomplish this task. I don't like that approach, but that's what worked for them. So it's different, and there is no cheat sheet for it, because if there was, that means already been used, and it's not going to be effective anymore, most likely. So you have to come up with your own, and it has to be separate, different, specific to your product. And spend time reading about marketing. I spent 2 months reading about books about marketing. After I built 2 products that had no users, I spent 2 months just reading about marketing. Eventually, I realized I didn't benefit from any of these books, but I finally appreciated the value of finding a way to grow your product, to the point of not just knowing it. When you ask anyone, is marketing important, is growth important, they say yes, but then they go back and work on this additional feature that has nothing to do with it. But when you finally appreciate it, that's when things change.
Would you suggest outsourcing that?
Absolutely not. No, that's a critical part of the product.
So I didn't spend a dime on marketing. No, I'm just kidding. So I really didn't spend any money on marketing, up until when I sold the company, and we still haven't really marketed. It's a sharing widget. It's pretty viral in itself. It says powered by Ad20, and a bunch of websites use it. So that's how it kind of went viral. But how did I get the word out? Through kind of untraditional means. Like I belong to a lot of these blogger websites and stuff like that. Not blogger websites, webmaster websites, like forums and that type of thing. And I'm just like, hey, here's a free service that makes your life a little easier, webmasters and bloggers. And, if you want to give me feedback, please join in. And that definitely, somebody at Greenpeace was probably, like, hey, this is actually useful. Let's implement it. And from there, it kind of took off. But aside from that, when I started taking it seriously, I saw the TechCrunch article about the competitor not raising money, but launching a demo. That's when I'm like, all right, I'm already pitching Mashable and TechCrunch, my other side project ideas, and they're actually biting. I'm going to use that as kind of a gateway to talk about, the thing I've had for 2 years. So, I think developing relationships with bloggers and writers is pretty huge in the tech industry. And I don't mean just like, PR people type relationships where, you just blast out every press release you can. But developing actual relationships, going to like the Mashable parties, events like this, TechCrunch, Disrupt and all that, and actually meeting them face to face. They're more likely to cover you, more likely to get the word out. And Mashable covered Ad20 maybe 10 times over the course of 5 years, and I think that was big in getting the word out about, competitive features that were kick-ass and first moving and all that stuff. So don't ignore PR.
So I would totally agree, actually, with both of those. It is dependent on what you're doing. Some things are more leverageable early on. So SEO is a long-term play. For most companies, you want to start doing SEO stuff early, but you're not going to see anything from it for a year, maybe longer. PR, you can see something immediately. So I'm a huge proponent of PR as a Kickstarter. It's not a long-term strategy, but it is a way of getting started. And PR is not... it's not as rocket science as some agencies and others want to make you think. You can definitely outsource PR at some level, but only if you're very actively working with them on it. For most companies that are starting up, it's better to just do it yourself. And just like Pat's saying, a lot of these bloggers are at events every night of the week in the Bay Area. And so you go and you meet them and you pitch them once and they're not going to write about it. And you go to another event and you pitch them again and they're not going to write about it. But the third time, they've kind of heard your name, they've kind of heard your idea a little bit. You reach out to them with an interesting angle about what you're doing. And they'll go, you know what? Maybe I'll actually write something about that. And then we did a variety of stuff that was just random and experimental, just to try and see if we could get something. So we a couple years ago, Steve Jobs was not going to speak at Macworld for the first time, and that was big in the press. We had a Mac product that was getting close to ready, but it wasn't going to be ready for Macworld. So we couldn't talk about what we were actually building, but we wanted our brand at Macworld. So we made these cutout flyers that were shaped like the Apple logo with a big picture of Steve Jobs' face on the front, and it said, "Bring back Steve Jobs," with our logo on the back. And we hired some kids off Craigslist to show up at 5 o'clock in the morning and hand them out to everybody that was in line at the keynote. Right, and people were like, "Oh yeah, can I have another one of those?" And just tons of people at the keynote were holding these flyers and passing them around. Right, there were. A handful of sites actually wrote about it as an interesting thing. It was on like the nightly news that they talked about it. Totally random, not specifically like, oh, we have this feature, talk about it, But it got some brand awareness out there, and it also connected our brand with some of the writers and the bloggers and the press, so that next time we contact them when we actually had a product, they'd actually heard about us a little bit.
What's interesting to me is that I heard one of my favorite words mentioned here many times, viral. I really, really love viral. Actually, to plug in the Gleb was so great. He's a good friend of mine, and several times, you just open some publication, he's there. Just like read TechCrunch, he's there. VentureBeat, he's there, and stuff like that. And he's just this one great example of, not to say that you guys are not. He's this one great example of the CEO who doesn't let opportunities slip through his fingers and says, oh, okay, I'm going to jump on this. I'm going to do that. Hey, do you want to do this panel at TEC? He's like, yeah, I'll do it. Screw it. Let's do it. So to me, sort of, again, I'll also be like that. And I'll use another little shameless self-promotion. To me, the main idea is actually viral. And viral is making your users go out and tell others about this product. And one thing that I'm doing is I'm teaching a course on viral marketing at Berkeley, and I think there are dozens and dozens of very, very specific viral mechanisms. There are widgets, there are groups, there are verticals. There is how you promote it on Twitter, how you promote it on Facebook, how you promote it on iTunes. There are many, many, many tricks. They're all out there. So you don't need my book, you don't need my class. You can just go out and figure out how others do it. It's lots of fun. It's lots of work, lots of fun, and very rewarding. Yeah.
You mentioned already the competitors. So, more specifically, what do you do with competitors other than hate them? You fight them, you follow them, you leverage on their products. What?
So I'll go back to my kind of illustration here. If you're here and your competitor is there, it's a big market. They're probably not going to affect you that much. I mean, unless the market is small and you're both really close to each other, then it makes a difference. But most of the time, it's not going to be a big deal. The market is so big that your users haven't heard of the competitors. We tend to think that everyone else is like us, and because you're the entrepreneur and you follow the news and you know about everyone, you think your users know about everyone, but they don't. And if they did find you, most likely they don't want to change if the product is working for them. So I would say do it just exactly as there is no competitors. If your customers are happy, they will stay with you. And if they're not happy, they're going to leave you. You win or lose based on what you do, mostly, rather than what your competitors do.
Well, it is so West Coast. It's disgusting. Gosh, on the East Coast, you'd be taken out and shot right there. So wrong.
So day to day, I totally agree with Waleed. There is a strategy which is often used by startups, which you can take advantage of. If there's a much larger company, particularly one that's not doing a great job, you can a lot of times ride on their coattails. So we haven't done that much in our space because there hasn't necessarily been a big leader in our space. But when one of the companies that is a competitor, when they changed their pricing model and they raised prices, and that made a lot of very unhappy customers of theirs, we were proactive in reaching out to them, right? So we created a switcher discount for them and reached out to people who were complaining on Twitter and that were unhappy about the service and things of that sort. In our previous company, one of our competitors chased an existing kind of legacy company in the space. And so the legacy company was very large and had a lot of brand. This upstart was new, had a better product, but not as well known. And they kept constantly, very publicly comparing themselves to this company, which is a weird thing to do, right? You don't want to market your competitors typically, but this other company was so much bigger that by marketing them against them constantly, it put people's minds that, oh, there are these two companies and I should consider both.
I agree with both sentiments. I don't think you have to be early to a market, but it certainly helped me. It let me stay nimble, not have to raise a bunch of money, etc., which was great. Aside from that, if you're an engineer, if you're coding up stuff, release early, release often. That helped so much for my product. That and a combination of responding to, well, for me it was publishers, but customer feedback, being more responsive than the competitor, is on Twitter, the social networks, etc. That goes a long way.
My quick story, and one of the reasons I reacted so painfully to Walid's absolutely correct story about competitors. What competitors? There is big market. Back in 2004, I think, Fotki got a really nice term sheet from one of the largest VC companies that I don't want to mention, and everything was due diligence was almost done, etc. And then they're calling me in, and I'm meeting with them, and they're like, well, we're not going to invest. I was like, what? And they're saying, yeah, there was just this article in Wall Street Journal that there is this company, Photobucket, that they're funding. I was like, what are you guys talking about? And I gave exactly the same pitch as Walid, and they're like, yeah, young man, go back home. We're bankers. We know our stuff. We spent years on Wall Street. There is a big guy funded out there. So that was like, to me, completely like, what? I was actually pretty close to crying, which, I don't normally do, because it was like, what? We were ready to, screw the whole world, be so huge. We had great plans, great and huge VC company, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know. That's my kind of thing.
So how did you change your business strategy? Then you've got this situation when you're talking to someone, the reaction is so-so. Did you adjust your business strategy? And you never mentioned, actually, in all your cases, business strategy is not that clear in all sides.
Right.
So it goes through partnership. How did you do with it?
You mean what happens when when a situation like that happens, like when you have an investor who pulled?
Initially, you have some business strategy when you start, but with whatever reason, it didn't actually happen.
Oh, okay.
It does not bring you money that you thought it's supposed to. Then, what happened?
You guys wanna?
Well, I thought the question was for you.
Oh, just for me? That was very easy. We just kind of, that was very easy. We sort of continued doing what we were doing. We actually grew. We grew pretty significantly after that for a while. But the problem was when you're it's like when you're just about to get married, and then, the wedding night is everything is ready. The guests are there. You're like uncorking the champagne, and then somebody says, hey, I actually realized I love the other person. And you're like, whoa, nice. So the main problem is dealing with the guests, not dealing with your own feelings. And we actually had that happen several times. So what you do is you kind of, you figure out where you still have competitive advantages, and we had lots of them. But in the case of Fotki specifically, it somehow turned. It's a very profitable business, millions of users, lots of business-to-business clients. But it somehow turned into more of a lifestyle business, not because that was meant to be, but really because we were East Coast. Because you go on the East Coast. I hope I'm not like this East Coast hater. I love New York and Boston, but you go to this big event. Half of the people are lawyers. No offense to lawyers. Every third. Absolutely. They're just like they make very little sense to you when you're a startup looking to grow. They're important, but you don't want an event like this with 30-40% of people representing law firms. Then lots of others are accountants, lots of others are consultants. In a big room like that, there would be 15-20% of actual startuppers, and then you go talk to them, and huge majority of them would be business to business, like financial companies, etc. And you're so lonely, and you're just like sit there in the corner and go like, oh, I want to go to some nice place. I heard there's Silicon Valley. So anyway, what we did is we kind of, it became a lifestyle business, and then at some point my business partner actually said, hey, you know what, I heard there is Silicon Valley, and he actually, big kudos to him. He actually nagged, and I was teaching at NYU, and I was doing other nice things, and I was like, I don't want to go. He's like, no, we have to, and we moved. I think that was the biggest change, which I wish we have done like 16 years ago. So.
And actually, how many people here are actually started a company, or are planning to start a company?
Nice.
Awesome. I love it.
I know, like
Guys,
almost
put
every
your
people.
hands.
One more time.
Pretty much.
How many people?
Just raise your hand.
Pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow.
Love it.
Great question. I know.
So one of the things we actually, we've been talking about marketing and we've been talking about dealing with issues and everything. One of the things we haven't, you started the question with how did we grow to a certain size and everything. But at some level, I think most companies don't die because they don't grow to a certain size. They don't die because they hit some bump. They die because they run out of cash. And I think this is a bootstrapping discussion, and I think that's one of the key, probably most important things in a bootstrapping discussion is it's not about profitability, it's about cash flow. And that fundamentally, when you're running in a bootstrap mode, one of the most important things to think about is generating cash and conservation of cash. And doing everything possible to do those two things, which means you don't get the office until you need it. You work out of your house. You don't hire people until you are so overloaded with customers and work and everything else that you need that next person because you can't you just can't handle without having that next person. It's doing all the creative marketing and PR stuff that doesn't mean paying for ads. It's using your consultants, your accountants, your lawyers, and everybody else as frugally, as minimally as possible. There are certain things that are critical. You should be incorporated. You should make sure that your contracts and your IP is protected. But as much as possible, you should be trying to say, do I really need to do that? Is that really critical? And as a startup, there are lots of cool ideas that you can go do. You'll have people coming and saying, hey, let's do this together, and hey, let's do that together, and maybe I'll go chase this one. Every one of those is focus time away, which means you're going to need to hire another person to do something else, or some effort or time or money that goes into that. So more than marketing and PR and sales and features and product fit and everything else, the number one thing I would say you have to focus on in a bootstrapping world, more so than in a, hey, we're going to raise $100 million world, is how to properly manage cash.
So me, I knew I was going to move up to San Francisco from San Diego and focus on a startup of some sort. I've felt the need for years. And to do that, I'm a big saver of money. I hate taking loans. Paid for college myself, working full-time, etc., 2 jobs, and was able to save up cash. And basically, I was drilling through that for 3 years. And that's when the economy tanked, and I had plowed through a majority of it. Living in San Francisco, didn't have office space, working from home, eating top ramen, all that good stuff. And but anyway, I think savings are critical if you're going to bootstrap. And Gleb talks about the desire to hire people and the need to hire people for many types of different companies. I mean, I've been scouting for talent for 2 years to bring somebody on board, potentially a co-founder. I mean, I think a startup is similar to a marriage. You need 2 people to really raise a child, even though there's some single parents out there that do it. It's very stressful. Wish I had another person. Wish I was able to hire an employee. It just didn't happen. But savings were key, and staying capital efficient was very key. This is the cheapest startup I know of. Both in finding the cheapest hosting provider to host this button for everybody, and cutting cost on rent. You can think of. I was very cheap for 3 years. Cool. Questions?
How would, okay.
So I'm trying to see, again, bootstrapping is great. Just trying to see what data points are common and what are unique or maybe different just by circumstance. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about some of these you already touched on? You have co-founders or not? How long it took from founding to exit, if you did exit, and how many employees you have?
Or if you did.
That, just comparison point.
Or if you did funding.
And if you ever thought of getting funding, and did you try it, and what happened? Are you bootstrapping because you failed to get funding, or? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so didn't raise any money whatsoever. Bootstrapped for a very long time. Got profitable, actually, just a little bit profitable enough to pay the bills and all that, my rent. And then, throughout the years, a lot of M&A, talks, which are very distracting, by the way. I mean, you guys have had two annoying situations, to say the least. I mean, it's a good problem to have. Another good problem to have, is a company, multiple companies ideally wanting to buy yours, but it's also super distracting. And as the, sole proprietor of my company, it was a huge distraction. I mean, I couldn't, concentrate on any one of the, hats, multiple hats I was wearing. A lot of it is maintaining the product, emailing with publishers and all that good stuff, doing biz dev, etc. And I couldn't concentrate on that. So no VC, self-funded. Other questions?
Co-founders, outsourcing?
No outsourcing, and no co-founders.
And how long it took from funding?
So AdTenny is about 5.5 years old.
So I launched Networked Blogs in 2008, and it's myself and my brother was helping me part-time at the time. And I didn't get funding until very recently. So in the beginning, I just used my savings and kind of kept it lean as well. And then at some point, there was a time when I ran out of money, and I had to take consulting work on the side. That went for like a month, and then at that point, when finally I ran out of money, I had to go back to the product and think of, okay, I need to start making money from this product, which is something I kind of didn't think about much until that point. So I went there, added a few premium features that people could pay for, and then people started paying for them. So after like 30 days, that started adding up to the ad revenue, and that was enough to cover my expenses. So that kind of saved me from having to do part-time work on the side. Recently, early this year, we got funding from 500 startups, and then from TMT Investments, and so now we're kind of on a different path, and I'll let you know later how it goes.
So in some ways, from the co-founding perspective, we were in the opposite extreme. There were 5 of us that started together. Definitely unusual. But the way, kind of the thinking behind that was we'd all work together, and we wanted a core team of all of the skill sets that we needed to start the company. The way we funded the company was everyone committed to a year without salary. So that was effectively an angel round, right? We had 3 engineers, 1 web designer, and me for business stuff. So we had kind of the core team to go off and run for a year. About a year and a half, so we started in 2007. In early 2009, we did take a few $100K. Backblaze is probably the weirdest company to bootstrap. It is very capital intensive. We buy boatloads of hard drives and servers for all the data that people send us, and yet all of our customers pay us $5 a month on a long-term subscription basis. It would be the classic VC company to fund, but we had decided at the beginning that we weren't going to take VC funding to start the company. So we took a couple $100K. It was, in the grand scheme of things, it turned out to be a very small percentage of what it took to make the company. Early 2009 was when we had the 2 offers on the company, so that would have been year and a half, 2 years in from the time we started the company, and now it's been about 4 years.
How many employees? I meant that as well. You one, yeah.
In the beginning it was 1.5, now we are 5. Myself, I'm a designer, my brother, who is in England, working with me remotely, and 2 remote engineers. So it's a distributed team.
So we have 11 people full-time.
I have lots of. I had over 10 startups, so lots of different stories. Not to bother you, the one that I sold was the only one that I started myself. Had no employees, outsourced everything. Knew right away Manhattan Institute was the one who's gonna buy it. Knew right away that I need to negotiate. The deal was just really, really nice. I wish I repeated it many times. In all other cases, I had one other co-founder that usually was kind of the technical guy, and I was sort of the business guy. And both of them are my really good friends that also are friends with each other. And the interesting thing is that I think I learned a lot of technical things from them, and hopefully they could say that they learned lots of business things from me. I hope that's the case. In terms of employees, it was from 0 with the internship to up to 30, almost 40 with Fotki at the point when we were at the biggest. I think that was the last question. Let me. Should I wrap up in a couple of minutes? Can you hear me? First of all, thank you all very much for coming. I hope it was both entertaining and useful. I think the one thing that is really important is that, in terms of the things that we're all doing, I assume in this room, size really matters very much. And I think, whenever you're trying to figure out if something is successful or not, there's definitely one litmus test. If this is big, if it generates millions of revenues and or it's used by millions of users, this is something that is successful. There are other measurements which some people would say, well, if it's sold for a lot of money, then I don't care if it was used by millions of users, if it generated any revenues, etc. YouTube famously generated almost no revenues whatsoever. When they started generating, they were kind of just like playing with a couple of things. So there are different measurements of success. I think what's important and what I hope you will take out of this panel is that there are definitely ways to grow to millions users and or revenues on no investment or very, very little investment. And I think the present people here, they really did something really incredible, which is they were really, really very tenacious, very, very serious, very opposite to being nonchalant about starting something and saying, oh, it's a cool company, we can celebrate now, we had this nice article in TechCrunch, things are great, things are going well. But rather, we're very tenacious. We're I'm sure working late hours, burning through the last. Right? Yes. Burning through the last dollar, sort of, taking huge risks, etc. But it's a beautiful story. Most of the time, most of the startups don't succeed. But whenever they do, it's such a great pleasure. It's such a great feeling. When you create something and so many people use it. Just one of my favorite story was in New York actually several times when a guy brought us pizza. And there was Fotki on the door, and he almost dropped on his knees. He was from Salvador, and he was like, oh my God, he barely spoke English. But he sort of explained that he connects to his whole family. That was back in 2005. He connects to this whole family through Fotki. He had no idea, and he was like, free pizza. We're like, no, we're going to give you a $20 tip. He was like, no, free pizza. So we eventually did manage to give him money. But it's, times like that when you're like, wow, we're doing something really incredible, versus, the times when you sit looking at the computer, you don't even know, whoever is using it. So I think it's sort of worth it. And, if I were to leave you all with one thought, I think it's really important to sort of think about what makes a company grow. And it's very easy. I think it's very easy, especially in retrospect, when you look back, to say, this made it grow, that made it grow. So I think talking to people, I'm sure there are some of you or many of you in this audience who could also tell great stories, but talking to people like these three, you hear really, really great advice. So, make sure to buttonhole them, tag them. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was useful and entertaining. Thank you.
Events we have in 10 years of tech existence. Because for your openness, for giving a direct answer for not easy question, and for sharing your personal experience and kind of down to the ground advice. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
That was really great. You guys are really, really awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.